I generally try to do the speeches that I do and the promoting the things I do on a nonpartisan basis. But, okay, that's fine. Let me know if you can't hear me. Because I'm speaking to a partisan crowd, and I was asked to come speak to Republicans, I'm going to try to present this from a Republican perspective. First of all, as we think about this last legislative session, if we think about this last legislative session, the election bills that were passed purely on partisan basis. Senator Crowder, Senator Rivera, Senator Baumgartner all voted against the things you're going to hear about tonight. They voted against last year's 1303, which I'm referencing here, but they also voted against the next bill that happened this past year called 1164 that affected local elections. And it's something we should all be thinking about, even though it's not necessarily affecting November's election. But why would people bring a bill and pass it on straight party lines that takes local elections and rids them of almost all control? It rid elections locally of Secretary of State oversight. It said you can use any tabulation equipment you want. You can write your own software. It doesn't need to be certified. You can tabulate the elections any old way you want. You don't have to have anyone trained. You can go get the last guy that left the bar and say, hey, you're going to be our election official. It went so far as to decriminalize tampering with voter rolls. You can literally register under false and fictitious names and it not be a criminal activity now. I'm talking about for local elections, for your fire district election, your library district election, your water and sanitation election. And I just have spent this past week observing a very large election around Jefferson County. It's the West Metro Fire District. You may have read about it in the Denver Post. They're still counting the ballots. They got in 31,000 ballots. They're trying to count them by hand. Well, a few things happened as they tried to run this election under this new law. First of all, they sent out thousands of duplicate ballots. It was an all-mail ballot election. They sent it to both property owners and to registered electors. So they get in thousands of duplicate ballots, and they have, because signatures are not required, no ID is required, they have no way to really figure out which are the duplicates and not. Then, as you all may know, there was a bill that passed last year that 16-year-olds could register to vote. They can't vote until they're 18, but they could register. Guess what? They sent out ballots to the 16 and 17-year-olds. A 16 or 17-year-old is going to do what when they get a ballot? They're going to vote it. They also sent out ballots to a lot of non-U.S. citizens who own property. So they have 31,000 ballots that are voting for or against a $9 million tax increase. So it's not exactly unimportant. And of all things, the law is so bad that no one knows what's for and against the law, what was against the law. The other thing I noticed was that the judges, many of whom work for the fire department that's counting the ballots, they are looking to see how people voted. They're leaving the stubs on the ballot. They're pulling them out of the envelopes and looking at, you know, oh, how did Becky Mizell vote? You know? So anyway, our law has degraded to that point. And that's for local elections. That was the Republicans in the House and the Senate. Every one of them voted against this. They fought on the floor for hours, for days over this, and could make no headway. And so one begins to wonder why. Who could be and why are people promoting bills that you can literally say it's no longer a crime to tamper with the voter rolls? I watched two 18-year-olds register 10 minutes before they voted illegally. I mean, they were voting legally, but they were not supposed to be registering at the polling place when I saw them last Tuesday registering. And I thought, I wonder if these kids know that they could register under fake names for this election, and it's not a crime. How can this be? Why do we have a party that is forcing these kinds of election laws on this state and on the people of the state? And I will say that the Republicans are in Colorado at a great disadvantage this year. Even though, if you listen to the national pundits, they say Republicans have this great midterm election advantage, but not in Colorado because of the laws that have been passed. Last year, 1303, this year, 1164. So what we hear is nationally that the midterm turnout favors Republicans, not in Colorado. Why? There are 3 states that are exceptions to the rule. And that's because Colorado, Washington, and Oregon all have all-mail ballot elections. That turns the turnout assumptions upside down, because turnout is no longer a big effort. Turnout comes to the people. The ballots delivered to the door. And it is so easy to get someone to vote. And the best organized, the people who have the most boots on the ground, who arrive at the door first, and who are willing to, let's just say, put the most pressure on the voter, who are best at finding the vulnerable voter, unfortunately, will have an advantage. Colorado has lax laws. Trusting the system, Colorado has now gone to pretty much an honor system for elections. We learned over 200 years ago that honor systems don't work for elections. Everybody in this room has probably got some kind of election irregularity story, and we don't know the half of it. So what in the world are we doing with just a total honor system? The risks are happening in the mechanics. The mechanics are down in the weeds. Nobody wants to understand the mechanics. Those who don't understand the mechanics, and that's most of us, don't understand the mechanics, risk losing. I watched, you all may have seen the Broomfield election that defeated fracking interest in Broomfield. I watched that thing happen every day. Interestingly, I am here to tell you that the gas industry won that election. There was no question. I watched the last hundreds of ballots go in the ballot box. There's no question that the gas industry won that election. The problem is that someone took advantage of lax laws, very loose mechanics. No one had the courage to stop bad ballots from being put in the ballot box. I watched truly fraudulent, forged ballots go into the ballot box. Everybody agreed that they were, but nobody would stop it. And it turned the results. We're just not seeing people with the know-how, the courage, the resources to stop some of these things that are happening. Again, midterms, what the pundits are saying is midterm elections draw older white voters to the polls. And a lot of people would say that Republicans are older white voters. But remember, we don't have polls now. The ballots are coming to us. Ballot harvesting becomes the game. So my question to you is, how is a Republican going to win? How are the Republicans going to win when messaging and voter motivation are not the primary impact anymore? You know, in other states you will hear them talking about get out the vote, get out the vote, get out the vote by having the right messaging. Is that really going to be what gets it in Colorado? So if Republicans want to win, what are Republicans going to do to protect the ballot box, to have a defense? Because we spend our money on get out the vote. We spend the money on messaging. Is that enough? Is that enough? Now, I'm the last person in the world who knows, in the state that knows anything about football. Seriously, if Peyton Manning showed up at my front door, I'd go, no, who are you? But I think I do know that the Broncos decided that they didn't have a defense. And they spent money, big money. I just pulled up a few quotes. Defense wins championships. We needed to retool that side of the ball. They recognized their weakness. Have the Republicans recognized their weakness? Have the Republicans recognized that they need to retool that side of the ball? Yeah. And have a defense against all of these irregularities that have now become almost acceptable. So if we're just going to focus on messaging and get out the vote, I think maybe we're being cheerleaders. And I would just suggest that cheerleaders don't score touchdowns and cheerleaders don't do secondary. So, we need to be thinking about spending some money on defense. There are people beginning to say that they're concerned about whether or not national money will come into Colorado this year. It certainly should attract national money. But if you are a big contributor or a big PAC, and you see Colorado with essentially lawless elections, high-risk elections, an honor system for elections, is this where you're going to put your money? Nope. And the Republicans are actually not organizing for defense. What I keep hearing is, oh, we will just raise more money to try to offset these problems. I mean, I think the Broncos realize you've got to have a defense too. We are the only state, I mentioned two other states that had all mail ballot elections. In other words, everyone gets a mail ballot, whether you win it or not, whether you feel like you can vote in privacy or not. And then a lot of extra people are getting mail ballots, two of them at times, okay. We are the only state that has all mail ballots and same-day voter registration. It is a toxic mix that absolutely asks for corruption. 1303 that I said may steal our elections became effective in 2013. Again, every Republican lawmaker in this room voted against it, but it became law. It is very much at risk for this coming election. From 2002 to 2014, we have seen our state just year by year dismantle election security. We have less ID now, no ID in many places. We have voting system security that's some of the worst of all 50 states. We have very, very little voting system security. Almost any of us could hack a voting system without a lot of effort. Lax registration requirements, unilateral power by the clerks. And I know you all are going to have a robust, well-fought clerks race here. And I can't thank Victor Head enough for stepping up, because it is so important. I had a senator yesterday tell me, a state senator tell me, he was very experienced. He said, had I had any idea how much clerks and secretary of state have influence over the fairness of elections, had I had any idea, I would have run for Secretary of State. He said, because the election officials can make elections fair and a reflection of what the people believe, or they can absolutely create their own chaos, their own unfair disadvantage to their opponents. And Victor has come to the legislature many times now, taken hours and hours, days away from his job in order to let the legislators know how important it is to the people of Pueblo to start having fair elections. And I don't know if you all are aware, and I know these are probably probably not politically correct to say it, but Pueblo is pretty well known as having some highly irregular elections. And there has not been enough ability to defend, to oversee, to watch, and then when there are wrongdoings found, there has not been the ability to hold those accountable. We hope that will change this year. We believe that there are legal resources being put in place to support you guys in that this year. Right, but there's sure some insider fraud. You know, they say, everybody focuses on that term, voter fraud, voter fraud. It makes us forget the, if you will, insider manipulation is what I call it. That's where our biggest risk is. You know, our risk is not the guy, the 18-year-old who comes and registers under two names like I was talking about. That's not where our big risk is. Our big risk are the people who work inside the elections and can tamper with the equipment, that can approve, who purposely send out many, many ballots, who can approve bad signatures, there are just so many things that can happen from the inside. And Clerks Association has been the voters' worst enemy because they continue to make their jobs easier and less controls. And I told someone recently, and they like this message, I want to repeat it, that the Clerks Association is to voters as the teachers union is to students. The Clerks Association is not looking out for voters. The teachers union is not looking out for students. Okay, this year we will have 1 million more ballots in the mail than we did in in the presidential election. 1 million more ballots in the mail. 1 million more anything in the mail is going to create chaos. Much less ballots that we find in trash cans. I've picked up shopping bags full of live ballot packets. And your county clerk will tell you, oh, well, you could never get them through the system because signatures have to be verified. That is just like a false pacifier. You can get those things through the system so easily. There are many ways of doing it. I know how, all the insiders know how to do it. And you'll never get caught. So having that many more mail ballots in the flow just begs for problems. As we think about risk to the elections, I don't think about it in terms of the 18-year-old that's going to register under two names. I think about the highest thing is the undue influence that we see in door-to-door, high-pressure, organized groups going door-to-door, demanding that people vote their way and refusing to leave. I've seen some incredibly awful things happening particularly in poor neighborhoods where people have been threatened with, we'll turn off your heat. You know, we are coming in and we're not leaving until you give us your ballot. I mean, I've seen and talked to some of the situations, people that will just heartbreaking examples of how undue influence is being used with mail-in ballots. They're being used for barter, for cash, and with threats. So when we start seeing unions, churches, workplaces, activist gatherings, inviting people to, insisting that people bring their ballots and vote in a group, first of all, it's illegal, but it happens and people feel the peer pressure. I had those in red. Those to me are some of our highest volume problems. In orange, I have real fraud, probably in small numbers, but it does impact close races. Fictitious registrations and computer security breaches. I've mentioned to you all, you don't have time to hear about Broomfield on election night. The pro-business, the gas industry, won that, defeated the fracking ban by 13 votes. And it changed in the post-election ballot chase and the recount, and I saw with my own eyes fraudulent ballots being counted, and everybody knew it, everybody admitted it, but there was nothing that anyone was going to do about it. There were a long list of issues that we could, that could have been righted, but no one had. Everybody hesitates to go into this level of detail, and they say, well, we'll just do that next time. How much longer can we keep doing that? I don't know if anybody's ever noticed these numbers. In the recall, if you don't think that mail ballots, have a different result than polling place ballots, look at this. Huron, 69% voted no to a recall for the mail ballots. But those was, I didn't ever get the entire statistics, but that was the first 700 ballots. And voted 31% for recall. Think how different that was than the result of, and Morris had the same kind of thing. The mail ballot population, and you begin to ask yourself, why is this? Was it very, very different than what you got from people who came and voted in private at the polling place. Hudak, they almost tried to recall Hudak. Most people don't know this. The Republican probably won that seat in 2012, but because she won by 584 votes, but there were 648 Republican envelopes that were never opened. The signatures needed further cure, and the Republican Party didn't get on this in time. They didn't even start doing anything about it until days and days after the election. Try to get people to come in and cure their signatures after the election's over. It's not when you do it. You do it long before Election Day. So that seat would have been a Republican seat had the Republicans actually been focused on the mechanics. Think of how different, senators, your job would have been had you had that seat. That you did have, but that we didn't have the mechanics to pursue. That's another example of mail ballot. Here's another example, Center, Colorado, of what happened in a recall race when you had people voting at the polls. The noes won. These all happened to be Republicans who were being recalled, and those mail ballots voted to recall. Again, this is the difference between voting in private and voting ballots that people knew they were either being watched or their ballot would be looked at. It begins to be pretty remarkable when you begin to look at election after election after election, and you see the difference between what happens at the polls and what happens with mail ballots. So I think I've about used up what time I'm supposed to.
You have a full hour. You have a full hour.
Okay, all right. So fictitious voters, while there are not a lot of them, they can make a big difference in a close election. It is really easy to be a fictitious voter, and you never get caught. The way you do it, you download the registration form. Again, we have this silly honor system. So, which we know from history does not work. All right, unless you're a crook. But, all right, download the voter registration form. Yeah.
I don't want you telling us how to do it.
The bad guys already know how.
Well, I don't know, I just think it would be, somebody's got to hold that. You're in here telling us how to do it. They already do. I think it would probably back then.
Okay, all right. I will just say, it's really easy to do.
Nice to know, but in this public forum, I just don't.
Okay, I will honor your request, but I will just say.
There you go. We just need to up the registration at the local cemetery.
Do you want to know? Okay. Well, the reason I want you to know.
If I could speak on that
Yes,
for a second,
please
because I went and testified in front of the Senate committee on how voter fraud happens. And some people called that out and said, oh my God, he just went up there and showed everyone how to commit fraud. But I firmly believe that the first step in addressing a problem is addressing it and showing what the problem is. this is the problem, this is how easy it is. Now, let's get motivated and fix it. Let's get some people in there that can fix this stuff. So I kind of did the same thing. I went up, brought a mail-in ballot that I found in a trash can, and I filled it out. And I asked Wayne Williams was there, the county clerk for El Paso. And I said, would this pass muster? And, you know, would this get counted? And yeah, it would. And, you know, it was in front of a committee and everything. So I don't know. I kind of err on the side that it does help to point out how easy this is, because it gets you motivated.
Well, first, I agree with what you're saying, but the reason I say this, the reason why I'm cautioning you is because about a year ago, we had Secretary of State here, and he was telling us about the recall, and he gave us some ideas on how to do that. It was in the paper the next day, how, you know, he was up here telling us how to do the recall, and, you know, that was the bad press we didn't need, and I just need cautious, that's all.
Well, I'm certainly not here promoting, doing fictitious registrations. What I'm trying to do is to say, we, the people, have got to tell our officials, whether it's the Secretary of State, our county clerks, or our legislators, you gotta fix this. Yes?
Okay, and what I find most interesting, okay, is that my ex-husband was British. He came with me to the polls and wanted to vote, and because he wasn't a citizen, he was not allowed to even register to vote. And recently, the DA even comes to my door and wonders if he voted.
Well, I can't answer that, but that's public record as to whether or not
Yeah,
someone voted under his name.
that's very silly. And the other thing that really bothers me, is my mom and dad are both Democrats. They received their mail-in ballots today, but the government must know how I think or feel. I never even received mine.
So, okay, I certainly can't answer that. But my point here is that in Colorado now, it is very easy I can go in the basement of my house, I can register to vote under 100 different names. I never have to produce ID. I can produce any kind of mail that comes to my house from a government. I used to live across from the Aspen Municipal Golf Course. I can literally use the golf catalog that comes as ID, because it comes from the government. Anyway, there's so many ways to register under many, many names. You never have to show your face. The ballots will come to whatever post office box you want them to. Very little chance of getting caught. And there are clearly people doing it. And what numbers, we don't know. But when you make it this easy, people are going to do it. And when Victor came to the Capitol, one of the Republican senators said to him, no, you can't get that through. It's not going to work. You can't register that way. It's not going to work. We showed him exactly what the law was. He was astounded. He was astounded that it could be that easy. What do? And I would say, Pueblo, where you've got the greatest opportunity is training your judges, making sure that you have judges that are nominated by the party, not staffers, not people that your clerk chooses, but people that you choose to represent you as judges, and then have very robust watching activities, and don't back down. Your clerk has been a clerk who has tried to put up obstacles against watchers. I think you all have got to back him down and say, no, these are our elections. The elections belong to the people, not the government. We control our elections. The clerk is a scribe, not our boss. And so I just suggest to you that this is where you all can have the most impact. I won't go through the rest of all of this and allow, there is one other thing I would like to suggest. You all can do public service announcements for free, I assume. I mean, that don't say vote Republican or anything like that. But to remind people that they have a right to vote a secret ballot. that they can come to a voter service and insist on voting a secret ballot. And to never ever give anyone else your ballot. If they come to your door and want your ballot, you don't have to do it. Don't do it. It's just like how elderly people are reminded not to give other people their credit cards over the phone and all that. Start reminding people now. Don't turn your ballot over to anybody. Teach people how to say no. Don't ever vote in groups. You can tell this to people in your public service announcements. And start lobbying the Secretary of State for better rules. Secretary Gessler could make more robust rules, but he never hears from the public that he wants. So that's what's needed. Okay, are there any questions I can answer in the last 3 or 4 minutes here? Okay, all right.
Give us some defense moves.
Okay, well, one of the defense moves is train your watchers. I'll come back if you want, and we can spend a half a day talking about how to have robust, meaningful watching activities where you can challenge what's going on. That's one thing you can do. You can crowdsource. You know what I mean by crowdsourcing. Put something out there on the internet and ask everybody to look at it. So what if you took all the registrations in the 30 days before the election and published them and said, hey, if anybody sees anything funny, let us know. Somebody will find something. Yes, somebody will find something. It's public information. And they'll go, wait a minute, Becky Mizell doesn't live over there. Becky Mizell lives here. What's she doing registered over there? Oh, she's registered twice. Wait a minute. And that will happen. And that will, when people know that their name is going to be out there in the public, it tends to curtail the behavior. And one of my friends did this in Aspen, where I was living for several years. After the election, she published the names of everybody who voted. And there were people who showed up and said, I didn't vote. And, when those things become, and do you know what? Things started getting cleaned up. So there's a lot that you can do to crowdsource, oversight. Also, you can publish the name. You will find that there are people, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 adults sharing a mailing address. Publish it out there and see if people say, wait a minute, those people moved to Durango 4 years ago. When you see people harvesting ballots, publish their names and let people know. These people need to be registering that they cannot turn in more than 10 ballots. So when you begin to let people know you're watching, some of this stuff will stop. And litigate against the clerks, sue the clerks, when they violate their duties or they continue to allow these security breaches. People say there's nothing that can be done. There's a lot that can be done. And it's because we, the people, own the elections. It's different than any other kind of sort of government activity, if you think about it. We always think, oh, the government runs the election, the county clerk runs the election. Oh no, we run the election. We tell the county clerk what to write down. But in Pueblo and in many other counties, that's gotten turned on its head. The people have allowed the government to become the boss of them. And I guess I would leave you with the thought, please remember, maybe you just want to say to the election officials here, you're not the boss of me. Okay, so we have 5 minutes for questions. 25, oh my gosh, okay. Yes, sir.
Just like to make one comment. The last election, or general election, in the last general election, I heard that there were 5,000